Well, welcome everyone. This is the community discussion on for a week without driving in Fitchburg. And I'm Steve Arnold. I'm the treasurer of Bike Fitchburg, and I'm happy to welcome you here on behalf of Bike Fitchburg, the Greater Madison Metropolitan Planning Organization, the city, and AARP Wisconsin, who are all sponsoring these activities. Let's go on to the next slide. A Week Without Driving originated in Seattle. It's become a national and international movement to raise awareness of the great number of people in our country that can't drive or choose not to drive, either because of infirmity or age or youth or not be able to afford a car, many reasons we'll go into, and how they cope with the system that we've built that is so car-centric. We'll cover who can't drive, the kind of experiences they have, and what we can do about making a better system so that everybody can travel freely and independently. The movement was inspired by the book, When Driving is Not an Option, and we'll have a greeting from the author shortly. Our next slide. There are a lot of partners who have been working hard across Wisconsin to promote A Week Without Driving and the empathy for non-drivers that it's generating. You can see them on the screen. The MPO, our University of Wisconsin, Bike Fitchburg, Sun Prairie Action Committee, the Wisconsin Council for the Blind and Visually Impaired, Sun Prairie School District, Downtown Madison, Access to Independence, Dane Alliance for Rational Transit, Madison Bikes, 1,000 Friends of Wisconsin, the Wisconsin Bike Fed Alliance, the Transit Riders Association, and the La Crosse area transit advocates. A number of our local communities have passed resolutions or issued proclamations in support of this week and the efforts behind it. Fitchburg, Madison, Middleton, Manones, and Prairie Verona. The Capital Area Regional Planning Commission, our land use planning agency, and the Greater Madison Metropolitan Planning Organization. They are our transportation planners for the region. You can see on the screen one of the proclamations at a city meeting and a media event where representatives from the various municipalities met for a bus ride on our bus rapid transit. Today we will, in addition to these welcome introductions, we'll have the welcome video from the author, Anna Zygards. We'll have a panel discussion. We'll be open for Q&A, and we'll thank you and be on our way. Now I'd like to introduce Alex Andros, the Executive Director of the Madison Metropolitan Planning Organization, for her welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. So you did a good job saying what we are. We're not just the MPO, it's the Metropolitan Planning Organization. In case you're wondering what that is, it is a regional transportation entity. It's an agency who receives federal funds. And I'm going to read to you a little bit about exactly what we are. We're a federally designated agency responsible for doing the transportation planning in a very coordinated and regional fashion. And we ensure that to be transportation investments that are made align with broader regional priorities, including land use, economic development, sustainability, and inclusivity. Especially, that's really the focus of today. So we are all contained within Dane County. As the population grows, the population density, our planning area grows. But more importantly is what is our mission? Our mission is to lead the collaborative planning and funding of a sustainable, equitable transportation system for the greater Madison region. And the vision associated with that is creating a system that connects people, places, and opportunities to achieve an exceptional quality of life for all. So of course, for all is the key thing. And what's so powerful about the Week Without Driving is that it's one thing to study something, to read about it, to understand it, to care greatly about it, but it's another thing to experience it yourself by participating in Week Without Driving. For myself, I'm a very fortunate person. I have a car, I can afford a car, I can drive that car, I can ride a bike, I live in a community with transit that I can take. But not everyone has that opportunity. And one day that could change for me as well. So this is a really important thing for the Greater Madison MPO. We really reflect the values of the region. So this is a great event. And I'm really happy that you're here. And I'd like to introduce Bill Jetzer, who's going to be our moderator for today. I'm going to read his bio. So he is a City of Fitchburg council member, currently serving the second term. And he's resided in the city for over 28 years. So those doing your math, it goes back to 1996. Professionally, Bill works at SBA Consulting and Software Development, which has been very helpful this evening with all our technology. His educational background includes bachelor's degrees in physics and mathematics from UW-Stevens Point. But beyond his professional endeavors, he's deeply committed to this community service, actively participating in volunteer efforts such as this, and other events sponsored by Bike Fitchburg, waterway cleanup events, and city tree planting initiatives. With supportive family, including his wife and 3 grown sons, Bill values the importance of family and community cohesion. He appreciates outdoor spaces and finds solace and joy in Fitchburg's parks and trails. In his leisure time, he enjoys a variety of hobbies, including running, biking, swimming, gardening, camping, and photography. His dedication to community improvement and enhancement quality of life in Fitchburg is further demonstrated through his involvement in the Board of Public Works, the Transportation Transit Commission, the Resource Conservation Commission, and Finance Committee. So those are all City of Fitchburg things, but he's also currently on the board for the Greater Madison MPO. So in addition to the city, he is planning for the entire region. Really happy to introduce Bill.
Thank you for that, Alex. Yeah, so we have assembled here 3 panelists this evening, and I'll be leading the discussion this evening. I guess just a little bit more about the Week Without Driving and how this fits in with, priorities of the city and my own personal priorities. The Week Without Driving gives able-bodied people with the financial means and wherewithal to own and operate a car the opportunity to make a commitment to giving up driving for a full week in order to experience how our land use and transportation systems treat the 40% of our Fitchburg and Madison residents who don't drive. This is especially important for elected officials and urban planners who decide the physical layout of our city and the transportation infrastructure that people use to get to their destinations. We should be asking ourselves, would I feel comfortable letting a 3rd grader make their way to school by themselves, or to the library, or to the ice cream shop or a grocery store? What would happen if I was injured and suddenly couldn't drive? How far away is that bus stop? Does the bus go where I need it to? Is it even available when I need to go there? And, I look at my parents and I'm looking forward to a time, still pretty far in the future, but, I will at some point be elderly and I'll need to give up driving because my eyes have dimmed, my reflexes have slowed, and I just don't want, to cause any harm on the road. So how will I transport myself to all the various places that I need to go? And I guess on a personal level, you know, I appreciate the week without driving because it fits so well with my own preferences. I'm one of those people that Anna mentioned in her book, the non-drivers who want to see more transit, walking, rolling, and riding mobility options available in the community. I regularly go weeks without driving. I don't enjoy driving. I find it frustrating and stressful. I quickly get uncomfortable in the car seat, and it's kind of boring. I've lost friends to traffic violence. I've also noticed, as I'm sure all of you have, that everyone else on the road doesn't know how to drive and doesn't deserve to have a license. And all my life, I've kind of looked for alternatives to driving. I've been a transportation cyclist since my mom let me ride to swimming lessons when I was 9 years old with my brothers. When I got to college, I found that campus is very walkable, and that's by design. I could walk everywhere I needed to go. When I came to UW for grad school, I would hop on the metro when the weather wasn't cooperating. But when my wife and I moved to Fitchburg, I commuted to work with my bike. In recent years, I've come to more fully understand, how our land use determines the need for transportation and how that impacts people's physical and mental health, their personal finances, the city's budget, and the health of the planet. I use my time on the city council to advocate for walkable neighborhoods with pedestrian plazas where people can take care of their daily needs without the noise, pollution, and danger posed by personal motor vehicles. Places where owning a car would be an inconvenience rather than a necessity. That's my goal. And I think our panelists this evening would appreciate a place such as this. So with us tonight, we've got 3 panelists. And I will give you a little bit of an introduction to each of them. Let's go youngest to oldest. So I'll start with Patty Rolchin. She is a 10th grader at Verona Area High School. And she enjoys ultimate frisbee, trying new hoops, and she is on the varsity golf team for Verona High. She is the oldest of 4 siblings, and she lives in Fitchburg. Immediately to my left here, your right, is Jim Denham, Access Technology Specialist for the Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired, and also a member of Fitchburg's Bicycle and Pedestrian Commission. Jim has worked in the field of blindness-related access technology for over 30 years. During this time, he has lived and worked in 7 different cities across the country, including Chicago, Boston, and Cincinnati. Originally from Wisconsin, Jim grew up in Janesville and earned a BS in Computer Information Systems from St. Norbert's in De Pere. He is currently employed as the Access Technology Specialist with the Wisconsin Council of the Blind in Madison. He also serves on the Fitchburg Bicycle and Pedestrian. Jim and his wife have lived in Fitchburg since 2018. When not working, Jim can be found watching sports, cooking on the grill, or exploring new and interesting destinations across southern Wisconsin. And with us tonight on the line is our 3rd panelist, Joyce Hodges, who is founder, CEO, and director of the Early Childhood Learning Center, which is a nonprofit organization. For 38 years, she and her staff have worked with children with very special needs in Madison. She's a member of the Association of Professional Genealogists and a passionate documentarian. Her work bridges historical preservation, racial justice, creative storytelling, empowering communities through legacy and learning. Her pen name, Joyce Salter Johnson, is a historian, author, and community advocate born in Freedman Settlement of Good Hope, Mississippi, a post-Civil War community built by emancipated ancestors. She moved to Freeport, Illinois at age 11 and relocated to Madison in 1980. Joyce is the author of 3 books: The Freedman Settlement of Good Hope, Mississippi, The Beginning, The Early Black Settlers of Stevenson County, Illinois, 1830 to 1930, and A Pictorial History of the Early Black Settlers of Stevenson County, Illinois, 1830 to 1930. So with that introduction, those introductions, let's move on to our, as mentioned before, this series is inspired by the Thomas Zibbert's book, Seabirds, she'll tell us. When driving is not an option. And she was kind enough to record a message for us in the greater Madison area. Let's hear what she's got to say. And panelists, pay attention because I will ask you for your thoughts on this video.
Greetings, Madison and Dane County friends. This is Anna Zevarts calling to you from Seattle, Washington, where I live. And really excited to be here with you all today in this video recording to celebrate Week Without Driving and to help give you a little context about non-drivers and who we are and why this is an important concept and how it can be a useful way to help us think about how we build more inclusive communities where all of us can get where we need to go and can fully participate. So first of all, just to give you a sense of what is a non-driver and where this came from. So I'm a non-driver. I am born with an eye condition. It's a neurological condition. That means that it's not safe for me to drive. And working in the disability community, I started to meet many other non-drivers as well. And that started to broaden my sense of, not feeling so alone, not feeling as isolated as I had growing up in a rural area. Starting to realize that maybe, there's a lot more of us who can't drive than I think we think about. There's just this assumption, in popular culture and in the media, right, that if you're an adult in America, you drive, and driving is how people get around. But the reality is, for almost a third of us, that's not a reality. That's not possible, either because of age, because of disability, because of income, because we don't have a valid license. And so we need to start thinking about how we can build communities that work better for everyone, right? Where driving isn't a prerequisite to getting your basic needs met. And that, so really it's my own personal experience, right, as someone with a disability that drove me to write a book about driving and car dependency. It's called When Driving Isn't an Option, Steering Away from Car Dependency. It was published in 2024 by Island Press. And what I hope folks get from this book really is that, first of all, that non-drivers exist. And second of all, that there's a lot of expertise and knowledge that comes from listening to the community members in your own communities who can't drive and can't afford to drive. Or perhaps the folks who choose not to drive too, right? And listening to how, what are the things that are working well and what are the things that are working less well? What are the things that we could build on and improve to make access more possible? So one thing you all can do, first of all, is just think about for a second who you know in your own communities, in your life. Maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a neighbor, maybe it's someone in a church or a community group, someone you go to school with. Maybe it's you. What is their experience of not being able to drive, and how do they get around? And then, you can ask them too next time you chat. And if you are able to participate in Week Without Driving, taking that reflection and that knowledge with you to think about, okay, well, if you suddenly didn't have the option of driving for whatever reason, how would you get your daily needs met? How would you get kids to sports practice? How would you get to that doctor's appointment? How would you get groceries and dog food and do all the other things that you need and want to do to fully participate in your community life? So thanks again for inviting me, and I have to say, just shout out for all the work that is happening in Madison and Dane County already. I was there, in the spring of 2024 for a bike ped safety event, and was super impressed by the bike infrastructure, so much so that I actually started looking at housing listings and showing them to my husband and being like, hey, we should move to Madison. So I know you're doing a lot of things right. Keep up the good work, and thanks again for inviting me to speak with you.
Okay, so she packed in, a number of ideas there, and I guess I just want to get a little feedback from our panelists. Was there something here that resonated with you especially? Any big takeaways? Why don't we start with Joyce? We'll make sure that her audio is working before we get too far into this.
So yes, mainly what I'm hearing and what just to say that I've never owned a car or a driver's license, but lived my first part of my life actually for the first 40 years, I lived in a town, a walking town. Walked to high school, walked back, walked downtown, walked to your neighbors, walking community, pretty much. You could walk wherever, mostly. Um, then then but we didn't have bus transportation either. So and I don't ride a bike. So I did a lot of walking then early on. But when you get to the community or medium size or cities and larger cities, and a city like Madison, transportation is pretty much a must for some people. They don't have the luxury to move into a walking kind of community because there's too many places they need to go to get things done. You know, whether it is to get to one side of town for work and another side of town for childcare and another side of town for church. So I noticed that she said, or people that not only choose not to have a car, but can't afford to have a car. And that's been one of the things that in the community that I worked with, especially in the early childhood, my nonprofit, I found that bus transportation and not having a car was just a horrible drawback for a lot of people in the community. Sometimes you couldn't even take that great job that you needed because you didn't have the transportation to get there on time.
Okay. Jim, any thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. So in Anna's intro and also in her book, which I really encourage people to read, it's a really readable book, and it's really interesting to check out. So I really encourage you to take a look at it if you haven't already. One of the things that really jumped out at me is the 40% of people who either cannot or choose not to drive. If you think about that, take 10 people you know, 10, just random 10 people. 4 of those people either cannot or choose not to drive. We don't really think about that. I mean, you look at the Beltline on a Friday night and how crazy, how many cars there is out there, how many people are out there driving. And one of the things I really like about this Week Without Driving and Anna's book is it really highlights this issue and kind of brings this issue to because there are those of us out there that cannot drive or choose not to drive. And I think the introduction, as it says it really well, is, hey, we just assume that everybody can drive, and like Joyce was saying, driving to get to a job. For me personally, driving, public transit is an option when I'm looking at housing. My wife and I, when we were looking for our house in Fitchburg, one of the things we really considered is bus stops. And we were fortunate to find a house that had a bus stop right in front of it. Unfortunately, the bus stop was removed about 3 years later, so it's no longer there. But at the time, it was great because I could walk out my door, jump on a bus, and be at work within about 45, 50 minutes. I work in downtown Madison. So it was really nice. So, it's not just, taking a job, it's also deciding where you're going to live, what area, what neighborhood you live in, what house you're going to choose. So it's a really important issue. And I'm really glad that the book and the intro this week is really bringing that to life for a lot of us.
Addie, anything to add?
Yeah, just like adding on to how there's a lot of people who cannot drive. Like, for example, in the high school community, like over half of us cannot drive, or simply a lot of people do not have a car to drive. So it just gets down to a lot of just how people are getting to school, how people are getting to sports after school, how to arrange those rides. And it's like something that people don't think about a lot because high schoolers, for the most part, cannot drive around GDL. And once you are not on GDL, usually it's not a good idea to be hauling a car full of people with your driver.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I remember when I was in high school, sometimes I would be waiting after swimming practice for quite some time for my dad to come and pick me up on his way home from work.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I can throw a little softball at you, although maybe it's not quite a softball for Joyce. Addie, I guess summarize, why don't you drive?
I'm not old enough to drive. I'm currently a sophomore in high school, and I have a late August birthday. So combined with that, I do not turn 16 for another year, and getting my permit is hard for the DMV. It's like quite a while to get into the DMV, get permit test, the whole driver's ed. So with all that combined, like I cannot drive yet, and I probably won't be able to get my license and get off GO for another 2 years.
And are you looking forward to getting a license?
There's things that I'm looking forward to because I'm gonna be able to drive myself around, drive my siblings to all their activities, drive myself to practice after school, not have to wait like he said at all. But there's also downsides, like having a car is expensive if I can have a car at all, and there's other drawbacks, like driving can be hard, and like I know plenty of people at my high school have gotten into accidents or just gotten into complicated situations driving.
Jim, pray tell. Why don't you drive?
I have been totally blind since birth. And so obviously don't allow people without vision to drive. I have a condition called Leber's congenital amaurosis, and I'm a white cane user. And yeah.
Okay. Now, probably the most interesting answer is going to come from Joyce, who has made it to the age of 86 without ever having a driver's license. Tell us, why don't you drive, Joyce?
Well, it's a funny reason why I was like, maybe my oldest daughter had just been admitted to, she did her undergrad at U of I, and she was doing her law degree at the university here, and we lived in Freeport, and straight up from from Freeport, Monroe is about 67 miles. So when I said I never owned a car, I had to take that back. Back then, we bought a Jeep Wagoneer, an old one, but I didn't buy it for me. I bought it for her boyfriend to drive her back and forth to Madison, to whenever she needed to go to, when she was moving up to Madison to go to the University for Law. So then now everything is all settled, and I end up with this Jeep Wagoneer, one of the kind that had the wood on it and all of that. Back then, that was must have been 50 years ago. But anyway, I thought that I would try to learn to drive. So I hired some driving company to teach me to drive. And I know that I would never be able to do that. But number one, I don't know my left from my right. It's a really crazy kind of a family thing. You don't know. And then when they tell me to turn left, every time I had to look down at, figure it out. And so anyway, I never got my license. So I gave up on that. I gave up on that and decided I don't need a car. I'm in a walking community. And I was in a walking community until the 80s. Then I moved to Madison, and I thought, wow, this is great bus transportation. However, I lived in Fitchburg. I had to, again, when you can't afford to live where you want to live for the good transportation, you have to live where you can afford to live, and it might not have good transportation. And that at that time in the late 80s and the early 90s, there was no bus, and I would have to walk all the way up to where the park bank is now to get bus service. And what I used, to go, because I'd gone back to school myself after my daughter graduated from law school. So I go back to school, and I was working 11 to 7. And of course, there's no bus services at that time, 11 to 7, when you need to go to the hospital and, at 11 o'clock at night. And again, living in Fitchburg. So the transportation that I used then was called the Women's Transit Authority. Mm-hmm. And they would take me up to the corner, and I'd take a bus and that sort of thing. So the reason I never had license, never wanted a car or had the need for it. Later on, years later, when I opened up the centers, I had 3 such centers in town. So therefore, we transported children to and from after school programs. And my company had several vans. So when I needed to go for grocery for the school or something, I would just have one of the van drivers that transported the children to take me. And that, so I made do with that kind of thing. So, but I always tried to get wherever I live close enough so that I could have the city bus, and then have nice church members pick me up and take me back and forth to church.
Sounds like a valid. Yeah, so you touched on, you know, the affordability of car ownership. And, you know, here in the United States, transportation costs are the second largest household expense behind your rent or your mortgage. And so I'd like to hear from the panel, how does cost factor into your non-drivership? If you may be a non-driver by choice, you may be a non-driver out of necessity, but either way, there are costs to consider. The Bureau of Transportation Statistics notes that car ownership is now, for the past several years, on average, over $1,000 per month. And Addie, I don't mean to shock you here, but it's really expensive to own a car. And our youngest son, when he was 20 years old, he looked into getting off of our insurance policy. And he found that with his, 10-year-old car, whatever it was at the time, it would cost him about $350 a month just for insurance, which is, crazy for you're talking a young kid that's barely out of high school. Meanwhile, I'll just point out that, if you can live along the bus line here in the area, there is no way that Madison Metro will cost you more than $780 per year. And if you are low income, that number is cut in half, roughly. Also, we've got e-cycle stations everywhere, so if you're able to ride a bike and you enjoy that sort of thing, you can get an annual membership for about $200, although, they have promotional codes every year, and there's one currently valid. You get an entire annual subscription to B-Cycle for $75 at the moment. These costs are trivial compared with car ownership. On the other hand, without a car, if you don't have access to the bus or it's not there when you need it, you might have to resort to the most expensive type of transportation, which is to call a taxi or an Uber or a Lyft. So all of these factors, I assume, play a role in your lives. And so I guess the question is, how do you currently get to all the places you need to go? What are your financial pain points or insights into the finances of your transportation? And how much effort, Jim, you alluded to this earlier, how much effort do you put into planning your trips ahead of time? And, also, I guess, where you live, if you've got that choice. I guess that's a lot. Jim, you want to tackle that? So how do you get to where you need to go? What are your financial considerations, and how much effort do you need to put into planning your trips ahead of time?
Well, go ahead, Joyce.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Okay. So my wife and I do own a vehicle. My wife is a driver, so we do have a vehicle and use that to get around different places and grocery shopping and other different places. So we do drive in that respect. When I need to get around independently, like I said, the reason we chose our house is because it had a great bus stop. And that bus stop is now gone. And the closest bus stop is a little over a mile away, which a mile in the summer is not terrible, but it's still a mile, And in the wintertime, walking a mile in January in Wisconsin is not something you want to do. So one of the things that I plan for and budget for every month is Uber, because I use Uber to get to and from work. I work in downtown Madison. I work a hybrid schedule. Sometimes I'm in the office, some days I work remotely. So my schedule kind of just varies, and I need to be able to get to and from not only the office, but I'm also a technology trainer. I go see clients and do different things, and so I use Uber to get to those different places. So Uber is it's a great service, but it's not free. It's not there's a cost to it. So when I'm planning my financial budget is definitely taking the fact that I'm going to have to use Uber. If the bus stop was still there, I would be taking the bus to and from work. And as you mentioned, Madison Metro is much less expensive.
All right, Patty, how do you get where you need to go? And at the tender age of 15, do you bear any of the transportation costs for where you need to go? And how much effort do you need to put into planning ahead of time?
Okay, so I do not have to put a lot of effort into the costs, as you would imagine, because I do not have a car, I do not have insurance, I do not have any of that. I do work at a country club near my house, it's about 4 miles down the road, and to get to that, I take an e-bike. Just because it's easy and it's pretty fast too, because it's pretty quick. But that's pretty easy. All I have to do is plug it in, and I believe we got it about a year and a half ago for only a couple $100, and I've probably ridden it in for maybe 50 or 60 times over the past 2 or so years. So it's really efficient, cost efficient, and just generally helpful, so my parents don't have to be taxing me back and forth when I have work with the clubs. Then for school, I'm just able to ride the school bus, which is good. So it's nice that we have that transportation system in place for school, and of course, I don't really have to think about the cost of that. It's paid for everyone.
Okay. Joyce, how about you? How do you get where you need to go?
Well, again, until I retired from the company of 40 years, I used that transportation I told you about. I have drivers on the van. I use that transportation. Now, weekends was a different story about that. And when you can take a taxi, I live in the Shanks Corner, and I almost always shop at the Willie Street Co-op because I live alone and I don't need to carry a lot of grocery around. And that's cool. I could either walk there, take a bus there, no problem. But if I wanted to go further out to get less, maybe to Woodman's on Milwaukee Street, then I would have to take a taxi or Uber or a neighbor or a friend. That is when the planning come in, especially neighbors and friends. They're willing to do it, but you have to say, can you do it at this time and that time? Or when you volunteer, or, if I want to, going to church, I have friends take me back and forth to church. If I took an Uber to church, if I had to take an Uber to church and back, it would cost as much as $50 a month, $50 a week for me to go back and forth in Uber. And it would take me about 2 hours back and forth to go on the bus. In good weather, I wouldn't even try to do it in the winter, that kind of thing. So how do I do it? When I retired this is how I did it. Very fortunate and blessed. When I retired in about 4 years ago, I told my kids to never buy me I don't need a birthday present, no gifts, no Christmas, no anything. And they gave me an Uber account. So I don't even see the bill. but the point is this: I'm still a frugal person on their behalf. And when I need to go to long trips, I do rely on friends and the bus service.
Okay.
Yeah.
So kind of, I guess some of this has been mentioned in passing here, but what sort of challenges do you face on a daily basis? Having a kind of a standard city layout ish, for the United States here, we've got long distances between our destinations that require transportation. We've got to deal with the bus schedules. We've got to deal with the weather. We've got to deal with, Jim mentioned the closest bus stop to him is a mile away. Well, I imagine he's got to cross at least one road, and how safe does he feel doing that? Is this a little 2-lane road, or is this, 7 lanes of traffic he's got to cross? Just down the road from where we're sitting tonight, on Fish Hatchery Road, there's a bus stop for the school kids, and there's a crosswalk across Fish Hatchery Road, and there's 2 lanes of traffic in each direction, plus the bus and bike lane in each direction, plus 1 left turn lane. there's a crosswalk, but there's no light there. So why do we make our school children cross the road every morning and every afternoon? You know, that doesn't seem right. And then also, I guess for Addie and Jim, this is not much of an issue, but it may have been for you, Joyce. You know, are there challenges that you face in terms of racial profiling, or you know, your family and friends?
Well,
Speaking, you know, just in generalities today, with the way ICE is behaving, and the way, you know, the way that people of color have been treated over the centuries, I guess. So,
well, the way people, well, we want to talk about bus transportation over the century because we have to start thinking about Rosa Parks, but not thinking about it over the century. But over time, yes, and but of course not even over the years I've been on the bus. I think that just riding the bus, I think more than racial profiling, I what I find, and it might be tinged with some racism, but I don't want to say that. But when I'm riding the bus and people challenged people in terms of emotional, mental, whatever, when they're getting on the bus, sometimes, yeah, I might even get, you can get a different kind of voice from the bus driver than, you know, because, you know, the woman takes too long to get her stroller and her 5 kids on the bus, that kind of thing, you know. And it's a matter of courtesy from the drivers and not necessarily from the passengers sometimes. And I'm glad to say that over the years I've never found any. And I'm not saying it wouldn't be in other communities, but not so far that I've noticed. I think it's in general, challenged people may get some animosity from some passengers and some, you know, bus drivers. But other than that, now in terms of how accessible it is for challenged people and young women that have like 3 toddlers and a buggy, and how, is, when you can get someone in a wheelchair there, there's a ramp that goes down and the wheelchair locks in. What I find, if a young woman comes when she's got 2 kids she's got to hold on to and a buggy, sometimes in the bus stop the buggy goes sliding down, so it might be some way that we can have those same kind of clamps for strollers and such as we do for wheelchairs. I just, that kind of thing.
Patty, what kind of challenges do you face, and how much? I guess, yeah. What are your big challenges in terms of transportation?
I'd say the biggest one, especially for when I'm biking on the e-bike to get to my work, is that sometimes like the road I bike on, I forgot the name of it, but it's like the bike lane is not too big, and usually there's a lot of cars that go pretty fast on the road. So sometimes it can just be a little like nerve-wracking because I never bike at dark, but even in daylight it feels like sometimes like, oh, that's really close to the car. Like, do they see me here? Like, just it's oftentimes there's just not a barrier or anything. So that's definitely a challenge to plants.
Especially harrowing if there's a big curve, right? You're not sure whether they're going to stay in the lane.
Yep.
Jim, what are some of your challenges?
So one of my main forms of transportation is walking. Walking is a great form of transportation. Gets you around. And one of the challenges in Fitchburg and in other cities that I've lived in is lack of sidewalks. Mm-hmm. It's no fun to walk on the street. It's actually very dangerous to walk on the street. You're walking in the curb and you just don't know who's coming. Parked cars and it's just so Fitchburg actually has places where sidewalks literally end in the middle of the block, and there are places that just don't have sidewalks, and there are places that are not really built for pedestrians. There are businesses that have a big parking lot in front of them, and no sidewalk really leading to the door. So me as someone who is blind, I got to literally walk my way through a big parking lot to get to the front end of that building. So really designing areas that are pedestrian friendly is a real big challenge as well. Making sure that businesses are pedestrian friendly, making sure that our neighborhoods are bicycle friendly, but also pedestrian friendly. Roundabouts. Try crossing a roundabout as a pedestrian. It's not easy. And one of the big things the traffic engineers like, yeah, roundabouts, which making so much more convenient, so much easier. Well, not if you're a pedestrian. And I've also been told not if you're a snowplow driver. Not a snowplow driver, so I'm public roundabouts. But just so these challenges, a lot of our community is really not set up for pedestrians. And as I mentioned, access to public transit. When I was looking to get here this evening, I looked at Google Maps, and from where I live, it was a 26-minute walk. I could walk it, so 26 minutes. To take public transit would be 22 minutes. So just 4 minutes less for taking the bus. Think about that. 4 minutes less time for taking public transit. And to drive here was 4 minutes. So you do the math. Which one are you going to do? Yeah. So it's a challenge.
I hear you. So you alluded to this earlier, Jim. I guess I'd like each of our panelists to describe the place where you live and how that plays into your transportation needs and or frustrations. And, I guess sometimes the rug gets pulled out from under you, right? So how big a role did transportation play in your decision to live where you do? Jim, we'll start with you because you already touched on this, but let's reinforce it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my wife and I are looking for housing. One of our first questions to the realtor is it on public transit? And a realtor a lot of times didn't know, so I was making the calls to Madison Metro saying, hey, what bus stop is close by here, and what bus routes here, and I'm looking to get to here. It's a major concern. Not only in Fitchburg, but like I said, I've lived in a number of different cities. And whenever I go to new cities, the first thing I look at is, can I get to public transit? Can I walk to businesses? Is there businesses nearby that I can walk? Because sometimes, hey, it's 9 o'clock at night, you need to go to the pharmacy, you need to go get a jug of milk. And maybe there's taxis not available or whatever you need to be able to walk to businesses as well. And being able to walk to businesses is really important. Where we live now, I can walk to a Walgreens. This is walkable. It's a parking lot. I have to go through, but it is doable. And it is certainly there. That's one of the company, but it was one of the deciding factors of which other houses. Hey, there's a couple of those, a credit union, so there's a couple of businesses close by to walk to. The other decision that we looked at, which was really nice, is there's a park, Key Farms Park. We live right on Key Farms Park, which is, sometimes you don't want to walk to some place, you just want to walk. And sometimes you want to walk for exercise, and just, and there's lots of different activities in the park. So that's a really important factor of moving as well, being able to walk recreationally and having some place you can just walk and, get some exercise.
Okay. Addie, I'm sure you chose where you're living, but do you have any insight as to why your parents moved to that particular house?
I'm gonna be honest, I do not particularly know why my parents moved to the house to live in. We live in Fitchburg, kind of by Seminole Pool area, so a bit up from Key Farms Park. And we do not live in close proximity to a bus stop, I do not believe. Like maybe 1.5 mile away, but not very walkable bits. We do live by lunch with like a very nice bike path system though, so I have been able to get to Verona pretty easily, to downtown Madison pretty easily just by taking bike trails that are, I don't think you have to bike on the road pretty much at all, with the exception of having to cross roads to get these places, which is pretty convenient, but I just not exactly know on
Okay. And Joyce, what you said you used to live in Fitchburg and you're now in Madison. So what were all the decisions that you made to land at your current place?
Well, always, since I've been living in Madison, I I always try to find a place that has, the walking part. I have to have some, even more than public transportation, and within walking distance of that public transportation. And living here in Tanks Corner on Atwood and First Street, right here, it's just a matter. I can get to a bus in 2 minutes. Several times on either on First or Winnebago, or on East Wash. I can be at a bus stop within minutes. And this is a great hub. I can go all over Madison from just right here. And so in terms of public transportation, because I'm not a driver, when I'm looking at for an apartment, I look at a place that I can afford, number one, and number two, that has that kind of access to transportation. It has to be, I always, whenever I go through Paoli, I go, oh, I'd love to live here. But I always think, oh my God, if I lived here, I'd be stranded all my life. I wouldn't be able to get into Madison or, so yeah, I have to live within walking distance of access to Walgreens, to grocery stores, or close enough for bus service. And so I'm fortunate enough to pay for it, but I always think of people that cannot afford to live where there's public transportation and have to walk several blocks. And again, with your children, taking them to daycare with the stroller in the snow, that's who I would advocate for. And more than myself, I'm advocating for people that cannot afford to live where they would have great transportation service.
Right. How are we doing for time?
Good, I would say 5 to 10 minutes before Q&A.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess I've got a couple more points here before I wanted to do the wrap-up questions, but I'll just kind of gloss over them. I guess it's mainly a thank you. This one, transportation in the United States is the biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions, right? And that is largely what is driving climate change. And for non-drivers, they're doing the rest of us a favor. So thank you. And the other thing I want to say is that being car-free generally means you're going to get more exercise. You're kind of participating in what they call the gym of life. You're walking to the grocery store, you're walking to the coffee shop, you're walking to the pharmacist, etc. So you're getting your steps in, right? And Americans go to Europe on vacation, and they just wonder at how many more steps their Apple Watch is telling them that they get while they're on vacation, and then they come home and they're back behind the wheel, and the step count comes up, and we're paying that with paying for that with our epidemics of obesity and diabetes here in the United States. Additionally, car traffic creates a lot of particulate and gaseous pollution that is harmful, causes a lot of asthma. I guess worldwide, 1 in 8 deaths can be attributed to pollution. It's significantly less than that in the United States, but to the extent that it occurs, it's driven to a significant extent by car traffic. So again, you guys have kind of a leg up on the average driver in terms of your personal health. So the final two. Oh,
I would add, it's not just walking to the grocery store, it's carrying those groceries back.
yes, how are your shoulders feeling?
Yeah.
So the final 2 questions I want to ask each of our panelists. If you could make one small change that would make transportation easier for you, what would it be? And then conversely, if you could make one enormous change that would make transportation easier for you, what would it be? And let's start with Addie this time.
I'm gonna be honest, I've not thought of my small change yet, but I certainly know what my large change already, so I'm gonna start with that.
Okay.
So I had the fortunate opportunity to go to China, I think a year and a half ago, and they had such an amazing, like, metro and bus system everywhere, like, driving is so inefficient there, which is very good. We, at one point, had to take a taxi, and it took probably like 30 minutes to get from that, to taken public transport. So I think if we were able to do that here, just like put the efficiency they have in place, just that makes their trains, bus system so effective, that would be amazing. But of course, that's not particularly feasible to redo the entire city.
Right.
For.
Well, you bring up a good point though. Cars are very large, right? So in a growing city, just finding room for the people is difficult enough. And then if you need an extra 400 square feet for each one of them to leave their vehicle somewhere, you know, that becomes untenable at some point. And I'll let you, I'll give you a break and we'll come back to your small change. Jim, what's either your small or your large change?
Well, I'm gonna echo what Eddie said as far as public transit. My wife is from Canada, and while we were dating, I would go visit her, and she lived in Toronto, and just amazed at the great transit system they have in Toronto. You want to get someplace, you jump on a bus, boom, you're there. There's a great subway system, just a really, really great transportation system. And even I've lived in different cities in Chicago. Chicago has a pretty good transportation system. Not as good as Toronto, but it's still pretty good. And so if we could, our transit system and trains, I mean, being able to take a train, take an Amtrak from here to Milwaukee, you want to go to a Brewer game, jump on a train, so just the major transit systems increasing the amount of public transit. I think it was, if it goes back to the movie, if you build it, they will come. If you build the transit, people will use it. And I know it's expensive to build it, and I know people are relying on cars, whatever. But if you build it, if you put it there, people will use it. People will be there. The small change I would say is the sidewalk issue. Just having sidewalks, making business more walkable. I get you're a homeowner. You don't necessarily want a sidewalk running through your front yard, but let's think about our neighbors. Let's think about the people around us who might need that sidewalk to get from point A to point B. We don't want to have the hassle of keeping that sidewalk clear in December, when it's snowing outside. Well, let's think about our neighbors. Let's see what they might need. And, they might be pushing a grocery cart to get to the grocery store, and they need a sidewalk, or they're pushing it in the street. So let's be considerate of each other, and let's have sidewalks everywhere.
All right. Joyce, your large and or small changes that you would make so transportation is easier.
Well, I told you about my large one. I want them to make it safer for moms with buggies and stuff so that they won't go rolling up and down the aisle, or understanding when the bus, sometimes happen if people are in a hurry and the bus supposed to be at the next stop at the next time, the driver can get a little irritated because he's going to be late, but mom still has to get all the kids on the bus safe. And so that somehow has to be looked at some point, like they did with the bikes and the wheelchairs kind of thing. So that might be something that could be looked at. That's the large thing I think probably I'm thinking about. And, not necessarily for me. And again, not necessarily for me that, in where I'm living now, and I don't intend to be moving, I don't have the issue, but to have bus stops that you don't have to walk 10, 15, 20 minutes to the next bus stop to, that sort of thing. But okay. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. I guess before we jump back to Abby, let's piggyback on what Jim said earlier about the cost of providing public transit. And I just want to give some shout out to the city of Madison for their bus rapid transit and the transit-oriented development that's going along with that. If you ride around in Madison, you'll see that all along Rapid Route A and Rapid Route B, There will be tall buildings sprouting up, and these buildings will have, generally speaking, some retail on the first floor, and then, 4 to 12 stories of housing above it. So not only are we providing, an easy access to the bus stop, but you may not even need to go to the bus stop, depending on what that retail is at the bottom of your building. And that's really the correct way to do this. You get as many people along your transportation corridor as possible. And all of those people are paying property taxes to help fund that system. And that's really the most efficient way to do things. Back to you, Eddie. Did you think of a small thing? I guess you live in a single family home in a standard suburb. So maybe there is no small thing for you, right?
Or there is a small thing.
There is. Excellent.
When I do like to work, there's this little bit of the road, I think Stumble Highway, where you have to go all the way down to get to the Homa Country Club. And there's this little bit where the bike lane just ends for probably like maybe 100, 200 meters. And it goes around a curve down a hill though, which is a little bit scary not for the bike lane there. So if I would go there, that would be a very small change. It would be a little bit safer.
Okay. Yeah, I've experienced that myself. And in fact, it's reminiscent of, there's an organization called NACTA, the North American City Transportation Network, blah, blah, blah. But anyway.
National Association of City Transportation Officials.
Excellent, yes. And they have a whole chapter titled, Don't Give Up at the Intersection, because for many years, you would have bike lanes until you get to the intersection, then it's a free-for-all, and then at the other side, the bike lane would kick in again. So I guess you were supposed to use your Star Trek transporter to get you through the intersection there. Excellent. Well, that brings us to the end of our panelist discussion here. And I guess I'll open up the floor now to some questions from our audience. So anybody have a question for our panelists? And all right, go ahead, speak loudly for the camera.
How does going by transit affect your shopping? Groceries or whatever else shopping for?
Yes, how many grocery bags can you carry with you on the bus? When you were laughing there, Jim, why don't you just continue that thought?
Well, I mean, my shopping days, now that I'm married to a driver, grocery shopping is a little bit different. But I remember going back, shopping on my own, shopping independently, going to the grocery store and getting your groceries and then carrying those groceries because if you're blind, pushing a cart, probably not the best idea in the world. You probably take out somebody on the sidewalk. You don't really want to do that. So, carrying those groceries, and sometimes you limit what you buy. Sometimes like, okay, I'm not going to buy the case of water today because, I've got to carry this home. I'm going to wait and buy the larger items when I have, a friend with me or when I can taxi. So it really does change what you buy sometimes because you're carrying those things. You've got to carry everything home. You've got to limit what you hate. I can carry a couple loaves of bread. I can carry some, whatever. But I'm not going to buy the water. I'm not going to buy the 12-pack of beer, whatever. I think I'd buy the 12-pack of beer. But it really limits. It changes what you buy, and it really does have an impact because you got to transport those things to from the grocery store. The other thing with grocery stores is big, wide open parking lots. I remember very distinctly. I needed to make an emergency grocery run at 7 a.m. one morning, and getting to the grocery store. Okay, now I'm at the entrance. Now I'm going to cross this big, wide open parking lot full of cars, and it was a big, just turn and go straight, and just other people going into the door, so through the door. So it's big, wide open. Again, this is not being really designed for pedestrians. There's no sidewalk around that parking lot. Just forces people to walk. Okay, so everybody is driving their car in the parking lot and then walking to the store entrance. Well, some of us are driving in the parking lot or just walking through the parking lot.
Joyce, I imagine you have similar issues, except you're not 6 feet tall and a young spry guy here. So, how much do you carry home, and how limiting is?
Well, I'm pretty strong. I'm still pretty strong. And I was thinking the question is, how much can you take on the bus? As much as you can carry, I guess. And how much as you can carry. I was just thinking in terms of, I don't buy this until I have a ride. I can't walk from where I live on, First and Atwood down to the hardware store on Willie Street and buy 10 pounds of my bird seed and bring it back. I wait until I have a ride to pick that up because that's what I can't carry. I can't carry that. But in terms of grocery and living, and I live alone, so I don't have that much sometime to carry. But I don't buy bulk paper towel and toilet paper and stuff like that because I can't carry it on the bus. So yeah. So it is kind of when you have a bus or walking, it's limited what you can carry. But yeah, as much as I can carry, that's how much I carry on the bus.
Okay. And Addie, do you have a basket or panniers on your bike that you can carry a load of some size?
I do, I have like a little bike bag, and I can usually fit a decent amount of stuff there, like when I go to Friday, I fit a couple jackets or sweatpants or whatever out my bag. So I can fit around there.
You ever make a grocery run on the bike?
Sometimes I go with my best friend to Target.
Yeah, okay.
That's all the extent.
All right.
Another point about,
Go ahead.
is one of the other services that is available for non-drivers is paratransit. And paratransit is a service, for those not familiar, for those who qualify, they basically will pick you up and allow you to give you van service to the door. It's not, well, I don't use it for work because it's not very reliable. Sometimes they'll say we'll pick you up and you have to give them a 30-minute window. And but as far as shopping, some paratransit stores especially will limit the number of bags you can bring on a paratransit vehicle. So you go grocery shopping and you can only bring 3 bags. And so if you need to buy more than 3 bags, you better make multiple trips because they're going to say you only have 3 bags on the vehicle. So that's another limiting factor if you use that form of transportation to get to and from grocery stores.
Okay. I saw another guy. Yeah, go ahead.
How does winter weather and the lack of cleanup on sidewalks and bike lanes affect your ability to get around in the winter? Maxie?
Especially curb ramps.
Yeah. Where they pile up all the snow that they've cleared from the street?
Yeah, so it's the homeowner's responsibility to clear their sidewalk that's in front of their home. The city plows the streets, and so it depends on timing. If somebody clears their sidewalk and then the plow goes through, they wind up pushing a whole bunch of snow up on the curb ramp. And so I imagine that's particularly vexing for people who use a white cane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you learn to, when you travel in Wisconsin, you learn to poke your cane through to find, because sometimes you can't even figure out where the sidewalk is. It's this big pile of snow. Oh, by the way, there's a sidewalk right over there somewhere. You're poking your cane through and trying to figure out where that sidewalk is. I will not travel in the wintertime a route that I'm not totally familiar with in the summertime. So if there's a route that I know I need to travel, I will make myself familiar with that route. And then when we get snow, if I'm still familiar with it, I'm able to do it. But just with these piles of snow, ice is another big thing. You're walking along and the homeowner may have shoveled the sidewalk, gotten some rain, and then it freezes to ice. And so you have to be very careful. I mean, I've fallen. Falling is really push it for a little while. And some ice is very, be careful of as well. So it really slows travel down, and sometimes even limits limits trips and say, hey, I'm just not going to travel. I'm just not familiar with the route, and I'm just not comfortable traveling this in winter conditions. And also waiting for buses in the snow is no fun either. It's going up, checking that out. So when the bus is coming, and the buses are coming for 15, 20 minutes, you're waiting out there, jumping up and down, trying to keep warm.
Yeah, I imagine it's less bad if you're inside of a bus shelter than if you're just standing on a concrete pad, which is, and then every once in a while, there are bus stops that don't even have the concrete pad, standing in a pile of snow.
Yep.
Patty, what,
I wanted to get what Joyce had to say about.
okay, let's go with Joyce first, or second, I should say. So,
I didn't quite understand the question. I mean, I didn't hear it quite clearly.
yeah, how does winter weather affect how you get around on the sidewalks and such?
Oh,
Us.
it would, I have to use how would that affect elders in general, for sidewalks and stuff. For me personally, yeah, it can be a challenge. I mean, it's ice and slippery and all of that. But the sidewalks are usually clear because I'm very fortunate again because my bus stop is like less than 2 minutes from, and and pretty much if I'm going out early, and fortunately I don't have to go out early in the morning, and so it's usually I go out after everything's been snowed, been cleared up. But let's take people that did not have the luxury of being able to wait. They have to go to work early in the morning, or they have to take their kids to daycare on that route. How are they going to get that stroller across the sidewalk and all that? That could be that is a challenge, but I don't know if making sure that is an issue that the bus is that Madison Metropolitan Bus issue, or is it the city and personal property owners?
Yeah. I guess maybe it's not as bad if you live in an apartment building next to other apartment buildings because the property management company is likely better at clearing the sidewalks than 30 or 50 individual single-family homeowners who may have to go to work, and not even be available to clear that snow when it's falling.
Yes.
So aside from sidewalks, there's also the issue with bike lanes, which, the plows are always going to push the snow to the right-hand side of the road, and that's where the bike lanes tend to be. And sometimes they don't push the snow all the way out, so you wind up with terrible biking conditions. Do you bike through the winter at all?
I generally do not, because it's where I work close to golf course. But usually when I head to the bus stop, the morning in winter, especially after it snows, the snowplow will either, you don't have a sidewalk in front of my house that goes to the bus stop. So either we have to walk in the middle of the road or we have to walk in snowdrift like up to our knees. So that's obviously not safe. Up conditions, then it usually ends up being cold because we have that same scenario with either snowbanking like the bus or standing in the middle of the road. So yeah.
Yeah, and there are times also when the separate multi-use paths may not get cleared in a timely fashion, and so the only time if you bike in the winter, the only time you have to ride in the road is when the roads are slippery and everybody is having a hard time controlling their cars. Do we have other questions from the audience tonight?
I have questions that a friend that told her about.
All right.
She says the new bus system is almost impossible to navigate if you are senior or disabled. Buses have been discontinued or stops moved too far to walk, or nowhere to sit if you have to wait a long time for a transfer. Often cannot get seating buses, as is for those people. So she's, there's a bus out that moves few blocks away from where she lives, and I used to live on that block. So that's an issue. She says paratransit is wonderful, but not everyone is eligible for it. And her other comment is transportation to outside of as a proper is difficult. Can't get into the suburbs of Milton, Fitchburg, and Verona, so that limits a lot of activities of work opportunities.
That's a lot to unpack, but yeah. So the concept of of the rug being pulled out from under you. She moved into a place that had a bus stop.
Yep.
Madison Metro periodically, redesigns their network, and stops appear in new places and old stops go away. And so if you happen to be in a location where the old stop goes away, it can be maddening. I'm sure this has happened to you.
It has, and I think the biggest frustration I had with this was really no notice and no really discussion of how this is going to impact you. I mean, I heard about this because I'm kind of sort of connected with different Fitchburg and different things, and I knew this was going to happen, and so I called Madison Metro to kind of say, hey, this is going to really impact me. Can we reconsider this? And they blame the City of Fitchburg. And I talked to people in Fitchburg, and they blame Madison Metro. So it's the frustration, kind of the blame game of, well, that's the other side is the problem. The other side is the problem, and also not being got neighbors that never knew this bus stop was going away until it went away. And so really no communication to say, hey, we're considering making these changes. What do you think about this? Would this impact you? Is there something else we could do? We're gonna make a change. And just, I think that one community, these really do have an impact on people. These changes, your friend at the senior center, losing the bus stop. That's a really big thing. I have to use paratransit, which paratransit is not always reliable. And it can be a major challenge. So just communication is really important.
Yeah.
Question for Jim. Were these stops on Mickelson Parkway?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Speaking as a member of the Transportation and Transit Commission.
Yep.
So.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, and I think the frustrating thing is the stop was going away. It was there for potentially years, and it was your lifeline.
Yeah.
And the reason it's going away is because Metro is looking at ridership numbers, and they're saying if we remove that, stop and put a different stop here, we're going to be able to serve more people. So overall, more people are being served. But boy, it really hurts when you're the guy whose service is being taken away.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I noticed, I live just on the other side of Belline and Fitchburg, so I can get the B bus down in Fitchburg, but not all the way to the Library Senior Center.
Right.
Stop short. So for those people who need to use the Senior Center, it'd be great if bus service got down to Senior Center or Common Council, or library, or whatever.
Yeah, and I'll just state that Fitchburg passed a vehicle registration fee, a wheel tax, and some of that money is being used to expand transit within our system, within our city. So the 65 is going to be upgraded to all-day service, as is the 75, and the B will be brought down to Triverton Pike near the intersection with Fish Hatchery Road and McKee. And the 65 will also then terminate there instead of down by the library where it currently is. So with those changes, I think that will greatly increase the opportunity for people to move into Fitchburg and out of Fitchburg and through Fitchburg all day. So they'll be able to ride from the east side of the city to the west now, because they'll be able to transfer from the 65 to the 75, and they'll be able to go north into Madison on the B all day.
Mention the paratransit benefits.
Yes, and because the 65 and 75 are being upgraded to all-day service, that means those routes are now paratransit enabled. So if you live within 3/4 of a mile of either of those routes, whatever the finalized routes will be, you'll be able to take advantage of paratransit. And so this is going to be a boon for our senior center. People who would love to go to the senior center and spend a good chunk of time, but currently can't, because there's like one rented bus that will show up at a fixed time and leave at a fixed time. And so if you want to do anything else at the senior center, you're kind of out of luck. So this will greatly increase people's opportunities for visiting our senior center.
I would challenge that a little bit to say there's no people to get to use the public transit to McKee Park.
I'm sorry, say that one more time?
Using public transit from King Farms Park?
Yes, so the 65 will come up Fish Hatchery Road, and it'll turn on Brendan Avenue. And then it will go up Triverton Pike, and it'll stop there. And that's also where the B is going to terminate. So it'll, you will no longer have to cross Fish Hatchery Road to get on a bus.
Right.
Or McKee Road, I should say, either one of those.
You may, if you're on, depends with the 75, that hasn't been worked out yet.
Okay.
The 75 westbound down McKee, you might need to cross McKee Road. Hasn't been worked out whether that loop is feasible.
Okay.
And that service will start in August.
Yes.
Just a few more minutes left. And this is something that came up in the Madison panel discussion earlier this week. And this is kind of a question for you, Bill.
Okay.
But maybe some of the other panelists, if you've had experience with this, interested in hearing, you know, the impact that advocacy can have on elected officials and other decision makers when it comes to making these decisions about how the transportation system is designed and how it progresses, you know, and what happens, like messages that you think are important for elected officials and decision makers to hear, and effective tactics for making those messages heard.
Yes. So I guess, you know, the whole idea behind the week without driving is for elected officials to actually feel it, right? And, you know, get their own personal story of having transportation issues. And so if you email your, or give your alder a phone call or show up to a meeting and you relay a personal story that's, you know, easily relatable, people have sympathy and empathy, and I like to say, you know, I got this off the internet, but empathy plus action is really what it takes, right? So elected officials and city planners, they need to hear these stories of, hey, I don't have a car, and this is what I need to go through. And again, if they participate in the week without driving, there's even, you know, direct experience that they will gain and have yet more empathy and more sympathy for non-drivers. And that can spur action. So I guess Jim, you said communication is an issue, right? And this is a problem that you know, my entire time on the council, you know, we publish everything. We comply with open meetings laws, but people are just living their lives, you know? And so how do you communicate to the general public? Well, it's kind of a two-way street, but in this instance, you can bombard your elected officials, right? You can be the communicators here and say, hey, remember me? I just walked 3/4 of a mile to City Hall because that's as far as your bus took me. And I think, you know, to some extent, we, you know, like I say, we are expanding transit. So we do hear these voices and we do take actions. Unfortunately, government tends to go a little slowly. And then, of course, you've got other people communicating the exact opposite message. You know, people say to me, oh, well, I saw the bus just sitting there at the library and it was empty. I saw the bus just sitting there at Cahill, Maine. There was nobody on it. And I politely explained that, yes, that's the end of the route. The buses dwell there. They are waiting to pick up their next round, you know, going through the route. And of course, nobody's going to want to sit on a bus for no reason. And even when that bus takes off, okay, somebody's got to be the first to get on. Somebody's got to be the second to get on. It takes a while before the bus fills up and you're going to see the actual people there. But I've seen it myself. By the time that bus leaves Fitchburg, it's half full. By the time it gets through Madison, you know, they may be turning people away at stops. Public transit is a net good for society. And And, there's no greater examples than our three panelists here tonight.
I would add to Bill's advice that before he was on the council, Bill was an advocate. And he ran for office, and good things are coming of it. And you can too. So get involved in your city government. You don't have to mount a campaign. You can contribute by being a citizen commissioner, or simply by going to a meeting and expressing your concerns. Someone told me that if a legislator in the Capitol gets 10 letters in a week about the same subject, it's a tsunami. Holy smokes, this issue has legs. I better read up on this. So it doesn't take much to move the needle.
Yeah, and that's a good point you bring up. A handwritten note probably goes 100 times further than an email.
Especially activist boilerplate from one of the national advocacy organizations.
Right.
I'm from a small town, so I knew my representatives personally. So when I go up to the Capitol or to the village hall or whatever, they know me. And so when I bring something up, I'm comfortable. I'm talking to them in person, not person as some bureaucrat, robot. So make yourself known. That's how I got involved here, because I got to know you. You're right.
Okay. Oh, last question.
No, it's a comment.
Comment.
Thank you so much for sharing your life experiences. I really appreciated hearing from all three of you about what life is like as a non-driver. Thank you.
Excellent segue. I was going to say the same thing. So I want to thank everybody for coming tonight, and especially our panelists. Let's give them a little round of applause. And so as Anna mentioned in her welcome video, non-drivers have a wealth of expertise. We've witnessed that tonight. I'm grateful to our panelists for sharing their lived experiences with us. And as we just discussed, I would like to encourage everybody to give the week without driving a try. If an entire week is too much, try a single day, one full day without driving. Are you going to give up trips? Are you going to bum a ride? Are you going to ride the bus for the first time, perhaps? Whatever it is, give it a try. Reflect on the fact that some people live their entire lives this way. Jim, Joyce, Addie's got the benefit of, being young, and she will grow into the ability to drive, but not everybody has that option. So think about how this, how that changed the way you behave, and what is your city doing well? What can your city do to improve? And if this evening has convinced you that the benefits of car-free living is worth it, as we discussed, I'll encourage you to get involved, connect with your elected officials, serve on a citizen commission for the city, show up at the plan commission meeting, show up at your city council meeting and make some comments. Yeah, so there's several advocacy groups that you might think about joining locally. Here we've got Bike Fitchburg and Madison Bikes. We've got 1,000 Friends in Wisconsin, the Dane Alliance for Rational Transit. Basically everybody that we put up on the slide earlier.
Here's the book.
Yes, that book again is. I'll have you read it.
Driving is not an option. Steering away from car dependency.
Yes, by Anna Zebra. And
Good we go.
excellent.
Perfect.
Stephen, I'll turn the floor over to you for some closing remarks.
Well, not too much. Just wanted to, I also think we should applaud our moderator, Bill did a terrific job. Thanks for everyone coming out. Thanks for Terrace Point. In my opening thank yous, I did forget to thank AARP Wisconsin for buying copies of the book and distributing them, and our Fitchburg and Sun Prairie and Madison library branches distributing copies of the book to people that might not otherwise get a chance to read them. So thanks again for everybody that participated. Annie, Joyce, Jim, thank you.